Well, good evening, and welcome to the 2022 Kerlan Award presentation. I'm Lisa German, the University Librarian and Dean of the Libraries at the University of Minnesota. This evening, we gather to honor this year's recipient of the Kerlan Award, Andrea Davis Pinkney. The Kerlan Award is given each year in recognition of an author or illustrator's exceptional attainments in the creation of children's literature and their generous contributions in support of the University Library's Kerlan collection of children's literature. Ms. Pinkney is a longtime friend and contributor to the Kerlan. As a creator of books for children and young adults, she writes picture books, nonfiction, fiction, and historical fiction. She's also been recognized as a Coretta Scott King Award winner for her writings about African American literature. In addition, she wrote the libretto for Houston Grand Opera's The Snowy Day Opera, based on the beloved best-selling children's picture book classic The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. And she has been a partner on creative teams for several theatrical and audio productions based on the works for young people, including those drawn from among her acclaimed books, Martin Rising, Requiem for a King, The Red Pencil, and Rhythm Ride, A Trip Through the Motown Sound. Andrea Davis Pinkney founded the very first African American literature children's book imprint at a major publishing company, Jump at the Sun. She enjoys an illustrious career as a children's book publisher and editor, and currently serves as vice president and executive editor for Scholastic Trade books. We are so pleased that she could join us today. Ms. Pinkney joins the ranks of previous Kerlan Award recipients, which include such literary luminaries as Minnesota's Wanda Gag and Kate DiCamillo, Lois Lowry, Barbara Cooney, and Tommy DiPaola. Their materials, and those of many other esteemed children's literature creators, are contained in the Kerlan collection. The Kerlan is an open access collection, and that means anyone who wants to explore the collection may do so by making an appointment in advance. Contact information is available at kerlan.umn.edu. Now I'd like to acknowledge the peoples upon whose land we meet. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. We must also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. This event is being live streamed as part of the Rain Taxi Twin Cities Book Festival week of literary events. Thank you all for coming, either today, here in the room, or on Zoom. You can learn more about our U of M libraries at lib.umn.edu. I will now turn the mic over to Alejandro Hennis, chair of the Kerlan Award Committee, who will make the Kerlan Award presentation.
Good evening. I'm Alejandro Hennis, better known locally as Alex Jennis. I'm this year's chair of the Kerlan Award Committee. My personal experience of books began with my first job at the circulation desk of McGill University Library in Montreal 50 years ago. Since then, I've worked in many facets of the publishing industry. I've worked in several bookstores. I was lucky enough to work for a small press in Los Angeles with new agey type of books that we thought were going to change the world. With our small print runs, I learned to do everything from folding printed pages to selling the books in the marketplace, and even to going to the Frankfurt Book Fair to sell foreign rights. We learned to do everything. Subsequently, I've spent 27 years in the bigger publishing world as the Upper Midwest sales and marketing rep for Putnam, which then merged with Penguin, and then that in turn merged with Random House to become the English language's dominant publishing house. So I've kind of done everything from selling books with print runs of 2,000 to Tom Clancy with print runs of 2 million. It's a wild thing. Now, resisting my dotage, I work part-time at Mackin Educational Services here in Burnsville, which provides books for school libraries and classrooms. I'm their foreign language specialist for collections. And now my inclusion in the Kerlan Libraries work has introduced me to yet another facet of the worlds that encompass our universe of publishing. The yearly Kerlan Award is given in recognition of singular attainments and creation of children's literature and in appreciation for generosity of the authors. This past spring, our awards committee voted unanimously to give the annual award to Andrea Davis Pinkney. Author, editor, and publisher in the world of children's books, Andrea has been a groundbreaking pioneer, a star, and an A-lister in the jargon of the entertainment world. Andrea, the storyteller and poet, has written and published numerous books and won recognition and many awards for her work. She was named among the 25 most influential people in our children's lives by Children's Health magazine. The more you know about her, the more impressed you are. Andrea's medium of choice has often been children's literature and especially picture books that bring to life her prose and poetic narrations with illustrations. As you look at the body of work she's given us, you see how she strives to introduce readers to the very real and very human history of African Americans' struggle for freedom from slavery, for civil rights, and for their place at the table of this land of free and land of abundance. The fact that these stories with the supporting artwork are meant for children is especially significant because in recent decades, these stories, like the ones Andrea tells, have had an impact that few of us could have imagined. You should consider that a classroom, a library, a bookstore, or a home is more likely to have books that introduce children to the heroics of Martin Luther King or the civil rights marches, as opposed to the heroics of, say, Abraham Lincoln or Washington's winter at Valley Forge. That's an amazing development and an amazing accomplishment for visionary writers and editors like Andrea Davis Pinkney. She's done this not only by telling the story of what happened, but also researching, internalizing, and sharing the stories of African Americans, both the well-known and famous, as well as the stories of ordinary children. Books like Fishing Day and Bird in the Box tell the story of ordinary kids dealing with ordinary challenges in a challenging world, as well as the stories of giants who, by their talents, graced this nation in a way that stretched the boundaries of our culture. She has a method of reaching children who may not comprehend the importance of humanity's struggle, but yet perceive the joy of things like Motown music, Duke Ellington, and Ella Fitzgerald, or the example of Joe Louis, the brown bomber who triumphed in a brutal world. And as the University of Minnesota's Kerlan Library and Archive joins other organizations that have given Andrea well-deserved awards and recognition, we have to acknowledge that it's the Kerlan that has received and been graced by your gifts. Thank you very much. And we're honored to give you the Kerlan Award for the 2022.
Woo! Take this off. Woo! Well, whew. Thank you, Alejandro. It's just great to be here. And good evening, beautiful people. Good evening. It is really my pleasure, honor, and delight to accept the Kerlan Award. Thank you for making so many dreams come true, and for the 80-degree weather. I appreciate that. I know that you all had control over that, and I appreciate you bringing it on. The best way to say, "Come along, children, don't you be weary," is through the pages of a book. Child, do you feel it? Do you truly know that stories play a rhythm all their own? Of course you do, and so do I. Because as the author of more than 50 books for children, as a parent, and as someone who travels widely through states and nations and neighborhoods, my primary purpose is to open a world of possible for children and the grown-ups who serve them. That is why tonight I am putting forth an inquiry. Here's the question. Who will rise at the Kerlan? Who will visit this place and be catapulted up, up, up? Yes, good people, that's the question. And for me, the answer is in the young readers I've met here in Minneapolis and throughout my travels. The kids, the book lovers, the storytellers, the dreamers. Let me introduce you to a few of them. The first grader has hungry eyes. He speaks no English, but he wants to learn to read. He says, "Me gustan los libros." I like books. Yes, his eyes are longing for something wonderful. When he receives a free book as part of a subsidized literacy program, he hugs it like a pillow. "Gracias," he exclaims, "muchas gracias." His excitement needs no translation. And I am thinking, you little one are my apple pie. You will rise at the Kerlan. The shy teenage girl approaches me, timid, but with an open face and an open heart, wide, wide open. Her teacher introduces us. The girl's name is Hanifa. Hanifa is ready for a story to be poured into her wide, wide openness. But first, she shares her story with me. It's a poem she's written herself. Dare I respond in the little bit of Arabic I know? Shukran, Hanifa. Shukran. Thank you. Thank you. Hanifa, you are my butterfly, taking flight on the beauty of your very own wings. Shukran, Hanifa. Thank you. You will rise at the Kerlan. The teenager, with pierced ears, a nose ring, and hint of a goatee, living out loud in lemon jello high tops. Yeah, he knows he's cute. Did I mention that he's fluent in American Sign Language? He shows me how the deaf express gratitude. Little boy Q, so proud to live out loud. You are my rainbow. You are my pretty prism of multicolored letters that spell pride and joy. You, so beautiful, filled with wonder. And like the magical ride of a merry-go-round, we sing, again, let's go around again. Yes, again, let's take another joyride, just like in our favorite book. Let's rejoice over and over, no price to the ticket, because you see, reading is free freedom. You, little boy Q, free freedom. You, kid, will walk in the door of the Anderson Library, see a new world, and rise at the Kerlan. The 6-year-old from Somalia. A brown-skinned girl glistening. Afro peeking out from her wear it proud hijab. She's a seeker, a reader, a kid who finds beauty in what she doesn't know because now she can learn something new. She sees what she sees, but she can't see what we don't show her. So right here, we take her on a special journey. This brown-skinned seeker is ready to rise at the Kerlan. And she gets to see and believe that a whole world of possible can start with her pencil playing on paper. She knows this because she's just had a behind-the-scenes look at how writers do what they do. And so I say, come along, children, don't you be weary. Rise at the Kerlan. Here are the Kerlan's treasures that will give you wings you didn't even know you had. Books, bring 'em on. Doodles, notes, letters, scribbles, sketches, thousands of pieces of children's book history in one place. What was going on in the author's mind when she crossed out, rewrote, started over, and scrawled a messy note to self? Is it the crumpled napkin scrap with the blurred ink that became your favorite book's cover? Tick, 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 tick. When I come to the Kerlan, when I get to see and feel and understand what made that creator tick, 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 and tick some more. The Kerlan says to every child, hello, eager one, your time has come to rise. Like that little boy Q and kids of every age, stage, and hue, the Kerlan is free freedom. Words and stories and pictures, open access to freedom's front door. Yes, child, it's time to rise at the Kerlan. Welcome to your very own liberation. Walk this way, little boy. Walk this way, little girl. Come, come, little they. Welcome to an archival promised land. And guess what? Even if you're the kid who can't hop a plane or a train to Minneapolis, even if there are no frequent flyer miles in your backpack or knapsack, even if you live in Brooklyn or Botswana, the Kerlan can lift you up no matter where you are on the map of wanting. Here we go, soaring through stories that fill us with an undeniable flutter. Brought to your very own living room through the Kerlan's digital dimension, so vast and vibrant that together we will fly through pictures and pen strokes and sketches and notes and a sky so high and so blue and so limitless that now you can see past anyone who tells you you can't or shouldn't. And so, who will rise at the Kerlan? You will, and we will, and we can, and we do. Speaking of young people on the rise, I'd like to end by sharing my latest book with you, along with a snapshot of another kid I've met in my travels and his personal story. 10-year-old Ty Brefaw, a determined kid from Johnson City, Tennessee, reads a book and learns all he can about Congressman John Lewis and his heroic march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the fight for voting rights. Determined to meet his hero, Ty Bree takes hold of a dream that sets a miracle in motion. Ty Bree's two grandmothers take him on the 7-hour drive to Selma, Alabama, on the off chance that their grandson might meet Congressman John. And so it begins. When they arrive with thousands of people who also have the same idea, the son's fingertips reach down to point Ty Bree in the right direction. John Lewis picks Ty Bree out from the crowd. And there starts a remarkable friendship. When I learn of this, I am thinking, you, Ty Bree, are the chosen one. You and your modern activism can show us the way. Through you and so many other kids, we will all rise on the wings of Wade in the Water. We will work our way straight to the soul of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and I Have a Dream, and Black Lives Matter. Our hopes lift us to the windows and mirrors of Coretta's vision, swinging open the front door and holding an open seat at the front of the bus to give us a good view of Rosa's determination, carrying us on the shoulders of John Lewis's invitation, yes, y'all, let's get into good trouble. This is where our kids come in. Apple pie, butterfly, brown skin beauty, rainbow. Determined Ty from Tennessee. You are turning the pages on history. And now, to close, I'd like to share with you a short excerpt from the book Because of You, John Lewis. This is the book, again, that celebrates the friendship between Ty Faw and the congressman, and is illustrated with the evocative paintings of New York Times award-winning artist Keith Henry Brown. I believe that Because of You, John Lewis may be available from our friends at the Red Balloon Bookstore. Here's the excerpt. When heaven's cloak called John Lewis home, when the world said goodbye to the crusader named Good Trouble, Ty Faw stepped up, stood tall, spoke about courage, spoke about strength, spoke about the determination of moving past doubt. Ty from Tennessee, he knew. Because of you, John Lewis, we shall not be moved. Because of you, John, we can all look to the sky. You've given every child permission to fly. Do you see it up there? The wide, wide blue. Because of you and you and you, we will lace new shoes, cross big bridges, wake up, wish, and march toward a brighter tomorrow. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to the Kerlan friends, and especially Mary Schultz, who is our coordinator of volunteers and our interns, because without Mary Schultz, we wouldn't have interpreters. And without the Kerlan friends and their fundraising, we wouldn't be able to pay interpreters. And that's an important thing, because when I think of you, Andrea, I do think of access. I think we want the Kerlan to be for everyone, and I think you emphasized that in your talk this evening. And when I am thinking about your voice, you had the opportunity to share Because of You, John Lewis, and that voice. I see that thread through all of your work. Your style, that is, if someone else was reading it out loud, I would go, oh, that's Andrea Pinkney. Could you tell us a little bit about that, about the development of this poetic, lyrical narrative nonfiction?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say I'm overwhelmed with emotion to be here. Just, to be among the materials in the Kerlan and everything that it represents. So, in terms of voice, it really comes from the oral tradition. I'm African American, and that is core to the African American experience. So I grew up at a dinner table that was filled with the musical majesty, really, of the oral tradition. And so when you came to dinner, you better be ready to tell a story, and put some fire behind it, and create characters and dialogue. And my father was a master at that. You better come. He could make anything poetic. A trip to the bank, finding a parking space, in line at the grocery store, and that's where it comes. And I know that he got it from his Southern roots, as did my mother. So that was the cacophony of, loud, boisterous, raucous, fun, meaningful storytelling that I heard growing up.
And so that voice brings you to your work. We often think of you about the narrative nonfiction, and we think of you in books like Sit-In. But this is new this year, right?
Yeah, that's new. That's part of the Bright Brown Baby series.
And tell me a little bit about this series, because I find such joy in these books.
Okay, so this is one of several books in the Bright Brown Baby series, published by Scholastic, and there's one big treasury, and then there are several board books that are part of the collection. And the reason that this came about was because, my husband Brian and I, who I've collaborated on for many years now, when a child is born, from the very first moment they open their eyes and their ears, we need to tell them how amazing they are and instill the love of storytelling. Now, I won't get all academic on you, but I will say that studies show that when we read to kids or tell them stories or engage with them from literally day one, it can chart a path of success. And so with Bright Brown Baby, the idea is children of color need to know that from the beginning.
Start now.
Start now.
Start now.
Right.
And the books are for everyone.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
I'm glancing down and I see my copy of Because of You, John Lewis. And one of the things I was struck by as I paged through was your citations and back matter and your research. Can you talk a little bit about your research process? One of the things that we are gifted with from the materials of people who bring us and give us their materials, their drafts of their manuscripts, we also get to see their research notes.
Mm-hmm. You're getting all that, by the way. You're getting all that back matter.
Better be.
So we love our back matter, and I always say there should be a reality TV show about the real kind of nuts and bolts behind the scenes of what goes on when you make a book. We authors and the artists and the editors involved and every one that contributes to the whole creation of the book, we obsess about every aspect, every serif, every fact, everything.
Wait, I need to interrupt.
Yes.
Fact.
Yes.
I did notice in this book, in the acknowledgments, that you thanked David Lovett for his meticulous and thoughtful fact checking.
That is right.
What you don't trust your own research?
I fact checked till I'm blue in the face. But you always need another pair of eyes on it. And David has done some other fact checking and scholarly research, and is top of the line and can help me find everything. So that I'm a creator of nonfiction. I stand by my work. I'm preparing text for young people, and they will ask me. And I want to be able.
True.
Yes, I want to be able to stand by it unequivocally.
And how do you know this is true? And then here's my question, Ms. Pinkney. What happens if you get caught not knowing the right facts? Do you have any stories to tell?
Yes, I do, actually. Okay, so a book that I wrote called Sit-In, which was an exhibition here. I don't know if Darren is here, who created the amazing lunch counter, the Greensboro, North Carolina lunch counter, and made it very experiential and real. What is it like to sit there? So Sit-In is Sit-In, how 4 friends stood up by sitting down. It is the story of the 4 students who on February 1st, 1960, went into a segregated lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and sat down in a nonviolent protest. So the narrative refrain of the book was, they sat straight and proud and waited and wanted a burger with Coke and fries on the side. So throughout the creation of the book, we were researching, fact-checking, speaking to the guys in the sit-ins, talking to them about everything. Other people who were part of the movement, scholars, experts, you name it. So the book is about to go to press, and my editor, Alvina Ling at Little Brown, calls me like literally at the 11th hour and says, late breaking update, we have just discovered that they did not, on February 1st, 1960, those 4 students did not order a burger and Coke with fries on the side. I said, okay. What did they order? And I immediately, I could feel my anxiety rising because the book was about to be printed. And first thing I said, Alvina, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. And this was being published on the 50th anniversary of the sit-ins. So I said, who remembers? what they ate 50 years ago. She said, Andrea, it's documented. Despite all of our research, all of our fact checking, all of our scholars, that was not uncovered until today. So I said, okay, we got to change it. We have to change it. Now, one would think that no problem. You swap out burger and Coke with fries on the side, and you put in what they ordered, donut and coffee with cream on the side. It ain't that easy. It's like a sweater. You have to undo the whole thing and re-knit the whole thing. Then the art had to come back, Brian Pinkney's art, because he had burgers and Cokes, which could stay, but then he had to go in to get all that art back from China and put in, which you'll see, donuts and coffee with cream on the side. And again, because somebody knows that. If I had said, oh God, whatever, you know, let's just keep it rolling. And by the way, in the movies where they say, stop the presses, it does not happen in real life. It's expensive to do, but we did it. I said, it can't go out like that. And it didn't, and now it's correct.
And so now you don't wait to give the fact checker the F and G.
No, the fact checker had the manuscript early on.
And it popped up.
We didn't have that information, yeah.
Wow.
And it wasn't just one, it was a lot of people, you know. So yeah, we don't wait till F and G, which is folded and gathered sheets. That's like the final, it's printed at that point.
And if you come to the Kerlan, you would see the folded and gathered sheets that came off the press. And,
Right.
and why do we have all that here? Why do I need the proofs and things like that? We're using language that when I'm teaching students, undergraduate and graduate students, in a couple weeks I'll be having 3 sections of a graphic arts class.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell those graphic artists as they look at these materials, these to-be graphic artists?
I would say study every aspect of the architecture. Know how that book is made. You know, it's so much more than what you see. You know, what you see is, you know, the glistening final, you know, product in a bookstore or library, but there's so much that went on before. And sit-in is a great example because, you know, if you look at the early manuscripts, it says it says burger and Coke with fries on the side, and then you read the final book, it's different. So
we see that creative process.
Right, yeah.
When you were thinking about coming to the Kerlan, when we invited you to come to the Kerlan, was there anything you were excited to look at?
Everything.
Oh.
I want to roll around in it. So yesterday we spent some time looking at Kate DiCamillo's papers because while I've been here I've seen the Edward Tulane opera, so I had to go back then and see. You know, there's just so much here, as you well know. Everything from Pokey Little Puppy, you know, everything. So many works.
And when you were speaking, you know, I did feel a little just overwhelmed with gratitude that the University of Minnesota thought that children's work was that important to create a space for the history of children's literature. And I'm thinking about your creative writing process. I know you teach graduate students.
I teach graduate students in the MFA in Writing for Children and Young Adults at New York City's The New School. And they should come here.
And
you know,
they should come.
Field trip.
So these graduate students, if you had one thing to talk about, one piece of advice to our audience today, the people who honor your work, but also want to hear it from your lips, is there a piece of advice to these writers, these young people who want to be published, have books out?
Absolutely.
What's their next step?
So I would say become a scholar of the genre. Read everything and go way out of your comfort zone. You know, I've heard people say, you know, I'm not really a fantasy person. You know, I'm not really I'm not a graphic arts kind of, you know, I'm not a graphic novel kind of person. Go in there and read it. You know, I'm not really nonfiction. Yeah, I don't, you know.
Well, you walked into that. What's the last book that you read that was outside your comfort zone?
The last book that I read that was outside of my comfort zone, well, I feel weird saying it, but I'm actually reading more adult books now. Imagine that, you know, imagine that. So I just read the Cicely Tyson autobiography, you know, and so.
And so were you reading that and you enjoyed that and hearing about her life, but was there a tiny editorial voice in your head saying,
Yes, all the time.
could this
All the time.
be adapted for young people?
All the time. And it's, I'm sure you have this, you know, it's hard to look at any book objectively because not only am I reading it for the content, I'm looking at every aspect. I'm looking at the end papers, the production, you know, there's something on a longer work for children known as a headband. It's a little piece of ribbon, you know, around the kind of where the book is joined. You know, I'm looking, did they use a headband? Did they not? How much was the production? You know, all that. So everything, the design, the margins.
And you can pick up a book and you can kind of go, oh, I know how much this cost them.
The unit cost, I'm thinking that. I'm thinking all that. I'm thinking all that.
So that's the business hat that you wear.
That's right. And I read everything, the copyright page, the dedication, the acknowledgments, the CIP data, the Library of Congress information, all of it. What printing is this? Where was it printed?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And I would say that to students. Don't just read the book, read every word. Study how that book is made.
I want to remind people in the home audience and people in the in-person audience that there are cards and there's a chat. If you have any questions, in about 3 more minutes, we're going to be taking questions from the online chat and from the people who are here with us today. I do want to say it's not that you at home were not invited. You weren't invited. But you weren't invited because we're being very COVID safe because some of us are at risk. And so we didn't want to have a conversation between me and Andrea and nobody. We wanted to see some faces and hear people go, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Or, Andrea Pinkney. Cecily Tyson, when I see that young adult adaptation, I know that moment happened. Ooh, I'm sorry to do this to you. Since you are an editor and you have been a publisher and you got an eye for the money, sometimes people ask actors, what was that part that they didn't get? What was that book that you just thought, or maybe you passed on it and it became a real big hit and you think, I wish I had published that. Is there a book out there that you wish you had published? And then you could say, Lisa, I'm not answering that question.
I'm not answering that. But I will say there is a long list. There's quite a list. And to be honest, I ruminate about it. You know, I knew that was going to be something amazing. But I will say, when I think of those books in my mind, I think, but look how amazing that is. Look. It was the right fit with the right editor, with exactly.
the right everything.
Exactly. Look how amazing. And isn't it great that won the Newbery? You know, isn't it great that, you know, thousands of kids are reading that? And so in the grand scheme, we're all in it together. We're all part of the quilt, the tapestry, the mosaic. That's really how I feel. So.
Well, thank you.
And the flip has happened. Like I've acquired things that I've met colleagues from other houses, and they've, you know, said to me, we wanted that, you know. So, and there have been things where it's gone over there, and I thought, they did a great job with that, you know.
I didn't see it that way.
Right.
I didn't see that book that way.
And there have been other things that have come to me that I'm like, I have to do this. And I've gone to bat for things, and it's worked out, so.
Wow. So I'm looking over at Pamela, and you have a mic. I'm just going to lean back a little so you can see.
I do have a microphone. Is it working? Can everyone hear me? Yes. Great. I'm Pamela Klingerhorn with the Rain Taxi Literary Review. Thank you both for that fascinating discussion. First thing I'm going to do is open up the book and look at the picture of the coffee and donut. I'm dying to see that. And then I'm going to go purchase the entire Bright Brown Baby series for my little grandson. I think that we have gathered some questions here from our live audience, but if you're at home online, please feel free to type it in the chat box, and we'll get to those next. The very first question we have here from our live members in the audience is, what are your thoughts and advice on book bans that the nation is now grappling with?
I think it's embarrassing and unfortunate. And I'll just answer that as a parent. I mean, my kids are grown now, but it's just speaking as a parent, there was all access in our home. If something was not age appropriate or there was content that I didn't feel was suitable, that was my choice to have that conversation at home.
Thank you. The next question from the audience is, what was the most challenging book for you to write and why?
The most challenging book for me to write was The Red Pencil. The Red Pencil is set in the year 2004 in Sudan and deals with the Civil War. And it's about a 12-year-old girl named Amira who cannot read or write and receives the gift of a red pencil, and it changes her destiny. The reason that was so hard was because it was so emotionally draining. I've traveled widely in Africa, spoken at schools, and it's really unfortunate. There are, in my research, there are 523 million girls on the planet Earth that cannot read and write right now, today. So that was very hard, just to face that reality. And also, how do I tell that story? There's tragic things that happen. I couldn't sugarcoat what was going on in a civil war, which is still happening. And so it was a very nuanced kind of exercise in narrative storytelling. And it's written in verse, which is why I chose that, because the verse insulates some of the tougher aspects of it.
This audience member says, you make writing seem easy, but we all know that it's very hard work. So after all these years, what do you still struggle with or find challenging in either topic or style?
Okay, I will say, writing is not easy. And I work hard at it. I'm very disciplined. I get up at 4 o'clock every morning. I write daily, and that would be the other piece of advice, if you will, or suggestion. I would say, write every single day. It doesn't matter. Write daily. And I think for me, what was the question about what was the most challenging? What's the most challenging aspect?
What either topics or styles of writing do you still find challenging or difficult?
Well, I write, largely about civil rights, and I find that challenging and difficult all the time. How do you present that content and make it accessible but real? And it's just, it's heartbreaking that this conversation is still going on, and that we still have to sit down with our children and have those conversations, which is the beauty of a picture book, by the way, because it helps us unpack the conversation. It helps us sit down and say, okay, let's look at the pictures. What's going on at this lunch counter? Do you notice that the waitress has her back to the young people? And when I'm at schools, I do a whole thing with the kids and the students, and I say, let's look at the pictures. Let's read the pictures. And hearing their answers, they're so honest, they're aspirational, like in the case of sit-in. I say to them, what would you do if you left school today? You go into a restaurant, you sit down with your friends, and you're chowing down, and you're, this is so great. And you glance over there, and you notice there are 4 people not being served for whatever reason. Maybe it's the color of their skin. Maybe they're physically challenged. Maybe it's a man wearing a dress. But maybe it's a homeless person. But for some reason, they're not eating and you are. What would you do? And all the hands go up, and I get wonderful answers. And then I flip it. I say, okay, same situation. You go in, you sit down, you're so hungry, you didn't have breakfast today, you didn't have lunch, and you're waiting, your tummy's growling, and all of a sudden you notice you're not getting a menu. Nobody's serving you. And then somebody comes up and they spray your shirt with coffee and ketchup and mustard, and somebody spits on you, and somebody starts yelling at you. What would you do then? And the hands don't go up so quickly. They have to think about it. And then I get really honest answers. Kids say, first kids say, well, I would sit there. I would think about Martin Luther King. And I'm like, oh, come on. I'm like, really? I'm like, somebody just poured hot coffee in your cup. You're going to take that? And one, Andrew from Atlanta said, well, I would go get my cousin, and we would come back. And I said, so what would you do then? I said, would you want to do to them what they did to you? He says, yeah. So the fact that these conversations are happening is important, and it's why we can't ban books.
So true. Thank
Yeah.
you. Our next question asks, when researching your books, what are some examples of information that you learned that was new or surprising to you?
Examples of new or surprising information. Well, obviously the sit-in example. That was very new and surprising at the last minute. Well, okay, so again, I go back to the red pencil, just the level of illiteracy in the world, among girls, and again, I say to kids, I get on a little bit of a soapbox, do you know how lucky you are? You can go to school and have a pencil and a book and a piece of paper, I wrote a book called With the Might of Angels, and it takes place in 1954, right when Brown versus Board of Ed was happening. And even though I read a lot and I know a lot about that era, I didn't know that a child would go, a black child with her mother would go to buy a new pair of shoes and couldn't try them on. And if she did try them on, they had to put paper inside the shoes because they didn't want her foot to come into contact with the shoe. So it's stuff like that. I'm like, wow, that's what that does to a person. And trying the clothes on, forget it. That wasn't even an option. So.
That's new information for me, too. That's amazing. We do have a question from our online audience. Librarian Gail Nordstrom, who is so amazing, asks, having worn many hats in the children's publishing industry, including publisher and editor, what is your experience of being an author working with an editor?
Okay, thank you, Gail, for that question. What is my experience of being an author being an editor working with authors?
No, the other.
An author working with an editor. Okay.
Yeah.
But you can answer both.
I'll answer them both ways. Okay. So I love my editors. I depend on them. They are my GPS. I could not do anything without them. In the case of, again, because of you, John Lewis, my editor, Diane, has the line editing. I mean, the nuanced discussion of a word that can change a meaning, an interpretation, and we debate, we discuss, we agree, we disagree, we agree to disagree, and again, what they do is just phenomenal. Speaking as someone who edits authors, I understand what they're going through because I am one, and my job really is to just hold that flashlight while they're digging. While they're doing the hard work. And so let me just say, when I'm writing, I'm not editing. I can't edit myself. It would be like doing your own dental work. You can't see, you can't do it. Or doing like psychotherapy on yourself. You can't do it. Again, with the flip of that is when I'm working with an author, it's really to, ask probing questions to kind of guide them and help them tell the best story that they can tell.
Thank you. The next question asks, how does creative inspiration strike you, and what are you working on next?
Okay. So the way creative inspiration strikes me is that if my body is not in a swimming pool every morning, it is a bad day. And that's what I do. I mean, it's the same routine, up at 4, writing, put on the coat, rush out of my house in Brooklyn where I live, walk over to the local, pool, around 6, swim, get some inspiration. And I often have a notebook at the edge of the pool. One school class gave me this waterproof paper, and I have a pen and a notebook by the pool, and I'm just, that's the moment. People who are not morning people, God bless you, I'm a morning person. That's when the light bulb is on. So.
And what are you working on for your next
What am
project?
I working on now? Okay, so what I have coming is I am a contributor to the Chelsea Clinton She Persisted reader series. So I wrote one last year, which was She Persisted Harriet Tubman, and the new one is She Persisted Ella Fitzgerald. And I will just say it's been a pleasure. Chelsea Clinton is very engaged. She's very involved, very hands-on. She pointed out something in the Harriet Tubman book that I didn't know, which was that Harriet Tubman, at the end of her life, wanted to receive pension funds for her work as a nurse in the Civil War. The government would not allow her to do that. They then said that they would give her pension funds on behalf of her husband who had fought in the war. Those monies never came. She fought for that money for 39 years and finally got it. So, you know, we all know a lot about Harriet Tubman, but I didn't know that. And that was Chelsea Clinton pointed that out, and it went in the book. So.
Great. The last question I have on the cards here is, what was it about children's literature that invited you to pursue writing and storytelling?
Children's literature, okay. So I was a child. And I will say that I was a child who really struggled. I struggled in school in many ways. And then my third grade teacher, Mrs. Lewis, gave me the collected poems of Langston Hughes, and it changed my life forever and ever. And then I looked at the book, then that made me look at the books in my library. And I would look, and I would, you know, sort of read and look at the pictures and all that. And then I would see like a name on the book, and I think, somebody wrote that. And then in the 6th grade, there was a writing contest at my school, at Stedwick Elementary. I did not enter the writing contest. I did write a story. I wrote a story about a man made of fire, and his limbs, his body, he was made of fire. When he got nervous, he would run faster and faster, and the flames would get bigger and bigger. Now, it doesn't take a psychotherapist to figure out, like, wow, like that's really something, you know. So didn't enter it, was in my notebook, and then the day of the assembly came where the winner was to be announced. I was way up in the bleachers, kind of zoned out, not really paying attention. They announced my name, like I had won the contest. I believe to this day that my teacher took that story out of the notebook and entered the contest on my behalf. And so they called my name, I won the story, my story won the contest, and my prize was that I got to take my entire family out to the Red Lobster restaurant for dinner. And I was just like, wow, like I could feed my family with writing. And I still do that. So that was the turnkey, I have to say, and I don't know who entered it, but I believe it was my teacher, and that's what made me.
Does your teacher know you grew up to be an award-winning author?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do we have any other questions from the live audience? And it looks like we finished up online as well, so I will turn this event back over to you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Hal. Thank you, Red Rain Taxi, for helping us reach a wider audience than we usually do at these in-person events. And this is the point. We have 5 minutes left, so we'll watch the time because we need to end exactly on time.
Sure.
That, again, I say, so Andrea, is there anything you wish I had asked you today?
Yes. Okay. I don't know if it would be in the form of a question, but I would like everyone to please remember to get a book, find a child, and read. I want to just say that the art of the read aloud is waning in my experience. People don't sit with children and read with them because that's when the conversations happen. And, you know, a lot of children perceive stories and internalize them different ways. So please find a child, get a book, and read and ask questions and enjoy the experience of the interplay of words and pictures with a kid that you love.
Well, I'm going to say thank you. Andrea Davis Pinkney.
Thank you,
for
Lisa
coming to
Vandrysik.
Minnesota
Thank you.
and being with us today. And I have just this moment going to ask our president of the Kerlan Friends, Gretchen Ronka, to come up to the podium and close us out.
Well, all I can say is I'm sorry the Kerlan is not going to provide a Red Lobster dinner for you tonight. But thank you to our in-house audience. Thank you to our virtual audience. And I know that there are standing ovations going on all over the country. This was an amazing, astonishing, and thought-provoking evening full of joy and laughter and lots of inspiration, and especially thoughts of us who are librarians, who are parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. We thank the University of Minnesota for sponsoring this every year. I thank the hard work of Alejandro and the award committee and the energy and enthusiasm of the Friends of the Kerlan Collection. And Rain Taxi has become an amazing collaborator in this. Is this the second or the third year, Lisa?
I guess, is this our third year? It's our third year, and I do want to remind people that if you're in Minnesota, Saturday is the Twin Cities Book Festival. And according to someone I knew very well, he would have said it's the best day of the year.
Yes, and that is our hero, Paul Fondrasik. And so I encourage all of you, go to your independent bookstores, the Red Balloon, the Wild Rumpus, Birch Bark. These books and many others are available, and I'm going to follow Pamela and get the latest baby books for my great-grandson. Thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Lisa.